Grand Theft Auto V is the latest installment of the Grand Theft Auto franchise and might possibly be the most obvious representation of Rockstar Games' personal political satire regarding excessive consumerism in America. Aside from the evident correlation between the in-game city of Los Santos and the city of Los Angeles, taking the game's main goal into consideration really exposes the message behind the game. The ultimate goal of Grand Theft Auto V is to make money. Players then are able to purchase whatever expensive luxury item that they can afford, like houses, cars, yachts, and jets. This in-game concept of excess and consumerism is basically an exact representation of excess consumerism in the United States. The interpretation behind the subliminal message of Grand Theft Auto V may vary from person to person. For example, somebody might believe that Grand Theft Auto V glorifies the ideal of excess and consumerism, but I believe that that ideal wouldn't be supported in a subliminal message such as this. In case you aren't already aware, there are several issues with excess and consumerism, with it possessing the capability to negatively impact all consumers, especially consumers who fall under the category of a middle or lower class citizen, based strictly off of the financial aspect of consumerism. So there are a few negative aspects of excessive consumerism that I like to cover. The first one being debt. I feel like debt is the biggest issue with excess in consumerism, specifically in America, because people run up credit card debt, buying stuff they really don't need. Taking an excerpt from a Becoming Minimalist article, the average American owns 3.5 credit cards and $15,800 in credit card debt, totaling consumer debt of 2.43 trillion in the US alone. Now, it's important to take that amount of money, $2.43 trillion, into consideration when thinking about how much of that money was actually put towards necessities versus luxuries. Debt is not an uncommon issue for the average American consumer to have to deal with, and excess in consumerism really does play a part in that. The best thing for the average consumer to do is just to remain financially responsible, and with more financial responsibility, that amount of debt could really be significantly reduced. Obviously, the prevalence of material possessions increase as you buy more material possessions, and as the value of material possessions increases, the importance of that material possession to the consumer will increase with it as well. With that importance of the material possession, in some cases being greater than that of friends or family, which is obviously an issue. Another negative aspect of excess in consumerism is lack of contentment. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, money doesn't buy happiness, and there's a reason why you've heard it. As the amount of unnecessary material possessions you own increases, the likelihood of your satisfaction of what you already possess will likely decrease. Now, moving on to why you should actually care about what I'm talking about. I'm just going to take a guess here and say that the majority of the people listening to this right now are middle class citizens. And I happen to believe that middle class citizens are the most vulnerable potential victims of excessive consumerism. Just a few things to keep in mind, really, when trying to avoid this issue. One, don't buy things you don't need. Uh, you don't necessarily have to buy everything as a necessity. But if it's not a necessity, can you afford it? That's a super important question to keep in mind. If it's not a necessity, can you afford it? Moving on to material possessions are okay. They're cool, but they're not the most important thing. The A material possession should never become more important than a friend or family member, and that should always be kept in mind. And finally, just remain financially responsible. It's simple. And with all that in mind, hopefully you can better reflect on whether or not you have an issue with excessive consumerism and what you can do to fix it.